Welcome to the Empowered Living Zone, where you can create the life you crave. With me, Dr. A, as a psychologist for over 30 years, a transformational life coach, and an expert in self-empowerment, my life's work has been inspired by the beautifully powerful resilience of the human spirit. We will share stories and successes of people who have not only overcome personal adversity, but have used their traumas and hardships courageously as a springboard into greatness. Create positive transformational shifts on your way to achieving phenomenal success. Get ready to level up as you move beyond the challenging terrain of your life's journey into the empowered living zone. Ignited by spirit, fueled by purpose, and guided by vision, the Empowered Living Zone show starts now. Welcome to the Empowered Living Zone, where we explore self-empowerment, personal growth, and the journey to becoming our best selves. I'm Dr. A, host, and today we are diving into how our bodies are crucial partners in our journey towards empowerment. We'll be discussing our physical selves and how they can support, guide, and enhance our path to empowerment. So settle in and let's embark on this journey together. My guest today is Dr. Pat Baccili. Dr. Pat is an international award-winning talk radio host, the founder of the Transformation Network and Transformation Talk Radio. She's well respected in various roles in the human potential field, and she has received numerous awards for her empowering radio messages. Welcome, Dr. Pat.
Thank you so much. I am so glad about this. This is really a super cool topic today that we're going to talk about. And jokingly, you saw me sucking on my protein drink before the show, because I know that if I don't do a few things, right, especially given the schedule you and I have, we were joking about it today, and we don't keep things fueled up, we're no different than a mechanical, like a car, right? If you don't do certain things with that car to keep its body and its functioning right, it's not going to work. How about making sure you got gas in your gas tank, for a great metaphor for today?
Absolutely. I was thinking about our discussion today, Dr. Pat, and I thought, this is kind of an interesting topic, because how often do we talk about our bodies? It's to me, it's really fascinating. And I'll be really transparent with you. The fact that we're having this conversation today, Dr. Pat, really reflects my own journey. And I'm sure that what I'm going to say will probably resonate with a lot of people, particularly women. And that is, I look at my own journey with my body, and the conversation that we're having today has taken me, I would say probably about 40 years to get to. And what is that? It's really about really understanding the power and the wisdom that our bodies hold for us. And, I think about my own relationship with my body, and I will tell you, when I figured out when I was probably about 15, and I was well through puberty, my first experience or awareness of my body was that I did not have the ideal body. And it was very clear. I got that message very clear. I was not petite in any stretch of the imagination. And it was really clear to me, the girls, my peers in school, those that were petite and, blonde or, not brunette and not big like I am, they got a lot of attention. And so what happened with me is, from that moment, I started having a not so healthy relationship with my body. I didn't like it. I hated it. I tried to change it. I got into my 20s and I got into bodybuilding. I got into bodybuilding because I wanted to change what nature had given me, what God had endowed with me. And I fought my body up until my 30s and 40s, when, quite frankly, my body won. And I went through a series of surgeries because I was abusing my body. I was working it to death. I was working out. I was doing all of these crazy extreme sports. And it was at that time that I started having a different relationship with my body. And it took me 20 years to get where I am today in terms of changing that relationship. And what I mean by that is, instead of hating my body, thinking my body was against me, and wanting to change it and wanting to ignore it, I've shifted into this place of really appreciating how magical our bodies are. I mean, they are the vehicle to our self-empowerment, and they are our vehicle to experiencing life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's look, I know it depends on where you grow up and how you grow up, but you're right about that. If you grow up looking different, and especially if you grow up in a day and an era, like I think back at how the modeling industry is changing. I'm not saying they're changed yet, not going there quite yet, but they're changing. Once upon a time, if you even had a model that was over 109 pounds, oh, no, they were like, nobody's going to read that. We're in a very different world now. We are coming from a very different place, but yet we haven't really connected all the dots. Everything in the United States and our society around this, we're so overwhelmed with body consciousness. We're overwhelmed with self-esteem and self-worth. Now there is a bit that comes out with, oh, what's that thing called? Social media. What? Like social media. It's ridiculous what we look at, what we say, and how much we pay attention to, but we can't ignore it. Because in the end, and what you're going to talk about today is a level of wisdom that has everything to do with self-empowerment, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Dr. Pat, you're bringing up a really important point. And I think there's a couple of elements that I want to highlight to what you're bringing up. One is, and I'm curious what your experience is, and I'm curious of whether or not this is a common experience. I think it's changing, because I think men are now becoming objects of, they're becoming objectified, just like women have been for decades or centuries. And that is with social media and with print media, the body is presented only as something to admire. Like it's objectified. Is it beautiful or is it not beautiful? And so we look at it from a physical perspective of, what does your body look like? And is it an ideal body or is it not an ideal body? And that's pretty much as far as it goes in our society. And so you have that element of it. Then you have the element of social media. And, this is an interesting topic, and maybe this will be a great podcast topic down the road. And that is the whole idea of comparison and social comparison. And social media has amplified exponentially comparison. And as we all know, I think it was Roosevelt, I think, it said that comparison is the thief of joy. I think is hopefully I'm giving that to the credit to the correct person. So social media has made this even worse. Before we would look at billboards and commercials and print, magazines and those kinds of things. And we would look at our bodies compared to the bodies that we would see in media, and we would make a decision. Am I okay or am I not okay? And that's as far as it would go. And I think we're still there. I mean, it's amazing. And I think what's really disappointing is that we're comparing ourselves to images that aren't even real any longer. Yeah. And that's really disappointing.
Yeah, but the whole thing is tied into what we started out to say here. And let's just talk about this comparison. Somebody used an analogy once about a poison apple, which comes from fairy tales, right? Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as a little poison. This is what he said to me once. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, think about it. It doesn't matter if you have this much cyanide or that much cyanide, or, the fact that what's her face took a bite of the poison apple. She only took one bite. That's all she needed. And I said, well, what are you getting at? He says, Comparison is the poison apple to self-esteem. And a poison apple to self-esteem is a poison apple to self-empowerment. And he went on and he talked about, and that poison apple becomes comparison, then gets linked to whether or not you're going to achieve the things in life you're going to achieve. And I never forgot that. And if you research this now, you'll see the research that comparing yourself to others negatively impacts your self-esteem. And if your self-esteem is impacted, tell me how it affects our self-empowerment profile.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of a circular relationship, Dr. Pat. I mean, if you don't trust yourself, if you don't have confidence in yourself, then you do not have what we call agency. And agency is just a big psychological fancy word that basically means I can do stuff. and it's important. And I think also what's concerning about this comparison stuff, Dr. Pat, is it's a very superficial thing. When you think about it, we are determining our value and our worth purely on the physical characteristics of our body. And what's happening is it's stopping us at the door. And what we don't realize is we get caught up in the physical package and whether it's ideal or not. And when we don't go through that door, what we don't realize is, oh my goodness, our bodies take care of us. It's like our bodies are our personal GPS system from which to navigate the world. Well, how is that possible? Well, one of the things that I learned, and I'll be honest, it was a very difficult lesson, and that is I learned in a very difficult way because of surgeries, because of being ill, because of being laid up, that I needed to listen to my body. And what I learned when I slowed down and really listened to my body was that my body was in constant communication with me. My body was letting me know, am I okay or am I not okay? My body would let me know, is this a safe situation or is this not a safe situation? My body would let me know, am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I anxious? My body was in constant communication with me. And what I realized is I spent probably 3 decades of my life ignoring my body, ignoring the signals and ignoring the communication. And that's where it ended me up is, in bed, laid up after multiple surgeries because I was ignoring my body.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating. I have been either on calls in meetings since 6 o'clock this morning. And, I was doing a show with Gabriella and, we were just chit-chatting a little bit. And the notion hit me that I need something in my body. That's why you caught me when I was coming on, just putting down a little bit of my protein drink. Now, when people ask me, why are you drinking that? That is like, da, 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 da. I'm like, you know why I'm drinking it? Because it has 30 grams of protein in. My brain needs that right now. And, then they go on to ask, well, do you know what else is in there? I said, of course I do. I read a label. And I said, there's more good things in this for me in this moment than not drinking it. And I think we have to be aware enough to make conscious decisions about what we need when. The other thing, let's just be really clear about this. There's a term that we use in business. It's called drought. There's this term, this language, when a company or an individual or it goes through a period of slowing down, let's call it, that we use this language like drought. Why do we use this language like drought? Because we know what it feels like. Yet we will starve our bodies of water. And, when we're thinking about our body talking with us, it tells us many, 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 many things. We get many signals. However, if we don't keep this fine-tuned, our body's ability to connect the seen and the unseen, better known as intuition, don't always work well. See, we're not just talking about the physicality, but in the Olympics, we're now more acutely aware of bodies. Every time we go through the cycle of a thing like the Olympics, we get more acutely aware of bodies, don't we? Don't you find that?
Yes.
But what's the message? Okay, subliminally. So, Dr. A, you have a PhD in psychology, so you're going to understand this. Watching the Olympics, I love it. And I talked about this on a previous show. Somebody asked me what my high point was of the week, what I felt greatest about. And there were two things. One of them, I was in tears in two Olympic events that had nothing to do with the sport. One of them was a badminton event between, I think, Thailand and I think it was China. And when these two women were done, the respect they showed for each other, I could feel it in every bone in my body. So let's talk about body and response that way. Every bone in and I watched the women just bow to the audience, bow to a partner. They were so connected, the winner and the loser, bowing. How does that show up again? Simone Biles, Jordan Childs, bowing to the most incredible gymnast from Brazil on the podium, never done before, bowing, literally bowing to the new gold medal champion. Simone Biles has never not won that. Bowing, body reacts. How many times have people said, oh, I felt chills? Let's talk about that. Because if the body is giving us messages, why don't we listen?
That's a great question, Dr. Fat. And that's what we're here for, right? That's a great question. It's interesting. Why don't we listen? We can look at it historically, right? I mean, if you look at our history, how did we get to the place? Because of course, we could only make assumptions. We can only project here. What I'm thinking about, Dr. Pat, is let's think about prehistoric man, and prehistoric humankind, wasn't distracted by social media, wasn't distracted by technology, wasn't distracted by the Industrial Revolution. And I'm curious, where were they more attuned to their bodies and the signals of their bodies, and I'm going to use what you just shared as a metaphor, bowing to the wisdom and listening deeply to our bodies. I'm curious about that, because somewhere along the way we lost our connection to our bodies. And I think it's several reasons. One is, you get into our history as Americans and you look at the puritanical times, and the puritanical times demonized our bodies. Our bodies were a vessel of sin. And so that was one place. I also think another place was the Industrial Revolution. And what happened was, in the Industrial Revolution, our values were on productivity over everything. And so, it's interesting. We hear stories today. For example, I've heard stories about Amazon and, people, having to empty their bladder in water bottles because they can't leave their stations. And we think that this is something new. It's not. This actually started in the Industrial Revolution, when factory workers were basically, metaphorically chained to their station and needing to ignore all of our bodily needs, whether it was emptying the bladder, whether it was feeding ourselves or whatever. And eventually, over time, we valued busyness and productivity over everything else. And so I think that this is what history has created in terms of this disconnect between our bodies and the rest of us, our minds. And, we go further into our IT age and technology. And, we have become a society that has overvalued our mind and undervalued our bodies.
Oh, yeah.
When in reality, this is an important partnership. This mind-body partnership is critical to our survival. It's critical to our empowerment. It's critical to our agency in terms of how we navigate through the world.
I mean, it's so critical that it used to be a conversation we would have when we were talking about people aging. It is not that conversation anymore, because, there's information. Here's the key to something you said, and the science and the research call it out. Comparison, you have to be aware you're doing it. You know, I've gotten asked in 20 years a number of questions along the way. Always, though, how do you think you're doing relative to other people in the industry? And I'm never able to answer the question. I mean, if you hear me on these interviews, I say, what do you mean? I mean, you could hear me literally like, what do you mean? And there's a video of me when I described who we are. We're the new mainstream. Back in 2007, I'm talking about this. And it was that question of comparison. I've never compared us to the industry. Why is that a benefit? Because when you compare, you're literally copy, and you will deflate and dilute your creative energy. You will stop at a creative baseline in order to meet a comparison as opposed to creating something original. I was reading an article today that talks about you have to have enough self-compassion to stop comparison. Self-compassion means you're enough. When you're enough and you tap into the body signals about how to enact whatever you have in your heart, your mind, your dream, your vision, when you can do that, you don't look to others. Now, let's just make a distinction, though. This is important when we're talking about the body. There's comparison that we do to keep up with the Joneses. You ever heard that expression, keep up with the Joneses? Not a great movie, but there's that expression. But then there's something else that is important to do, and that is to observe others in order to grow and learn. You see, they both have viewers. You both put on the viewing, whether it's your virtual reality viewer or not, but you put on the goggles and you start to look. In order for you to become a Simone Biles, right? You had to look at other tapes to get there. But where do you draw the line? And you draw the line by not losing your self-compassion and have it be replaced with envy. You see, this is what we're talking about. But the body is that thing that will keep our mind in check if we only learn how to do it. It really will.
Absolutely. It's interesting, as we're having this conversation, what comes to my mind, Dr. Pat, is, the body deserves a seat at the table.
Oh, yeah.
It needs a seat at the table. And, going back to social comparison, as you were sharing, what you were sharing, Dr. Pat, one thing that went through my mind is the problem with social comparison is it takes our focus outward. And you made an important distinction. Oftentimes when we learn from outside of us. We observe.
Yeah.
And what's different between comparing and observing is you observe and you make that reference, but you always bring it back into yourself. And you use yourself as a reference. You are the source of wisdom. And also, bringing it back to a statement that you started with, and that is the intuition, that, our intuition speaks through our body. And how does our body speak to us? Our body speaks to us through sensations. We've all had experiences, like, for example, let's look at emotions. Let's look at feelings. When we have anxiety or we have fear, the way that we know that we have fear or anxieties, our body shows us. We feel it in our bodies, whether it is butterflies in the stomach or in the chest, or a heaviness in the chest, or tension, or you can't catch our breath, or we have that feeling that we can't catch our breath, or our heart is racing. Our bodies do all these kinds of things to let us know. And I think what's really interesting, and I'm curious about what your experience has been around this, Dr. Pat, and we can talk more about this when we come back from our break, is, how often do we actually want the signals in our body to go away. So, for example, because of what I do for a living, believe me, I have lots of conversations with my clients around, oh my goodness, I'm having anxiety and I just want it to go away. And it's like, I will say to my clients, have you ever considered not wishing it away and actually just sitting with it and see what it has to show you? And they look at me dumbfounded, like, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Set with this? What do you mean? And I say, just try it. Just humor me. Just try it. The next time that you feel that familiar tightness in your chest and you're like, oh my God, I just wish this would go away. Just sit with the tightness in your chest and just see what happens. See what you notice. And they'll come back and they'll go, oh my goodness, you're not going to believe what happened. I sat with it, Dr. A. And first of all, what I noticed was all of a sudden, it was like it was talking to me, like it was literally giving me a message about something that was terrifying to me. And when I recognized, oh, that's what this is about, it gave me the option to do something with it, to find a way to take care of myself, whatever that might mean. And it was an interesting experience to have with my clients when I asked them just to stop and listen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's talk about this when we come back. One of the most well-known in the field that could literally write a dissertation on what we're talking about is Simone Biles. And when we're talking about the 2020, we're talking about Tokyo, they've given it a name. They said she had the twisties. Mm-hmm. And what did that mean? She looked like she was in the air. She just, something was going on in the air, and she pulled out, what was it going on? So everybody, what did they say? They went to the fact that it looked physical. But was it really? Is that the perfect example of a body-mind communication, telepathic conversation that said, Simone, your body's telling you better rethink a few things, right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, let's definitely we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, I would like to continue that conversation. I think it's a great example. You are listening to the Empowered Living Zone with me, Dr. A, and my guest, Dr. Pat, and we'll be right back. We are back on the Empowered Living Zone with me, Dr. A, and Dr. Pat. And, Dr. Pat, we left out at a great place, and I'd like to continue, and that is with Simone Biles. I think she is a great example. She is a great example of where a person listened to the wisdom of their body. And so I would really like to talk more about that. You had mentioned, and I remember this in Tokyo 2020, everybody saw it. It's like, what just happened in midair? And she pulled herself out of the competition. And oh my goodness, there was so much talk around it and so much controversy. And I'm going to say this, Dr. Pat, I admire her for making that decision, because I'm sure it was a very difficult decision for her to make, because there's lots of people that were probably pushing her to do otherwise. Yet she listened, and when they talked about it, as you were saying, they talked about it as if it were a physical and merely a physical phenomenon.
Right.
And it wasn't. It was a mind-body connection. Her body was telling her, stop, something's going on. And she did. Not only did she pull out of the competition, but I know that she did a lot of personal work with her mind and body between the 20 and 2024 Olympics.
Yeah. And everybody saw it. I think Nastya Lukin saw it and called it out on air. And it looked to the audience physical, because they all asked her, what's wrong with you physically? But now she has become a phenomenal spokesperson for mental health. And it is the unspoken thing in sports. It is the thing you don't talk about. And yet at the same time, she became the one to say, look, I didn't pull out due to a medical issue. Right? But she was assessed daily 50.
Mhm.
They assessed her daily for medical clearance for future competitions. And then she said, no, after the performance I did, I didn't want to go on. That's what she said. I have to focus on my mental health. I just think mental health is more prevalent in sports right now. We have to protect our minds and our bodies and not just go out and do what the world wants us to do. I don't trust myself as much anymore. That
Oh my
was her
goodness.
statement.
Dr. Pat, I just got goosebumps as you read that. Um, that is amazing. We so often ignore our bodies and do what we think everybody else wants us to do or what we think we are supposed to do. And again, I admire her decision. She said no. I need to pay attention to what's happening in
Yeah.
my being. And, I think it's really important. I know that we're focusing on the body today. And the reason we're focusing on the body is not because the body is the most important partner, in our self-empowerment experience, but it's the part of us that gets ignored or just gets a bad rap. It's like a lot of people think that their bodies are against them. Um, and so this experience, you looking at Simone Biles as an example is powerful. It is powerful because, I love the statement. As a matter of fact, I want you to repeat it because it was so powerful. She appreciated, she appreciated and honored the wisdom of
Yeah.
the communication between her mind and her body.
Yeah. I
Look at
mean,
look
and
at how she's doing now. It's
well,
it's
she
it's
went on, and you know what's fascinating about it, because this is what's daunting about the connection of body and mind and mental health and physical health and what we're talking about today. You have to make this connection. You have to know who you are. When she fell off, when she fell off the beam exercise, what was it, yesterday, and you saw her wobble, everyone that watched had deja vu, right? Not everyone, but a lot of the folks that were there had a deja vu moment because they talked about the fact, this is the announcers. They were talking about, oh, it looked like she lost her train of thought because she wasn't really in an awkward, we have seen her hold on to that beam with her toe. But it was a moment as if she just couldn't connect the body. It was as if she had a moment of distraction. And my friend asked me, they said, oh, did you watch Simone? And then, of course, the floor exercise, double jumping over out the outside rung two times. I mean, if you're going to hit on the outside of the court, just outside the realm, your parameter once, you make an adjustment the second time, and she didn't. And so you have to wonder. My friend said, what do you think did it? Oh, I said, she had a day off. My friend looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, she had a day off. And my friend said, I don't get it. What do you mean she had a day off? When you are at that level and that status, a day off may or may not work for you. A day off gives you time to step back. It gives you a day off, right? Think about it, a day off. And I said, sometimes it works for some athletes and sometimes it doesn't, right? I've watched football teams, some sports athletes that I coach, I've watched them. And there's some that I say, dude, I got to tell you right now, you are never to take a day off, ever. Don't do it. Don't take a day off. And they're like, oh, but I have to. My wife, I was like, no, don't take a day off. You could take a half a day off, but don't, because I remember telling one guy once, when you step away from your sport, you don't even think about it. You don't think about winning. You don't think about, you're not focused. You step out and then it takes you a day to step back in. So when you take a day off and then you have to come back to compete, are you mentally prepared to win? And it's an interesting conversation because this is how we go through life. We don't realize how often in any given part of the day, we're in a win-lose mode in our brain. And our body is saying, oh, no, you don't have to do that. Please don't push yourself. And we do. 10 hours at the office. Wow. I'm going to go out for lunch. I'm going to have a fried chicken piece. Really? That's what you're going to have? You see, this is it. But the question is, how do we get back to a place of balance with that? Now, the balance beam, it's kind of funny because anybody that watched that said she could have pulled herself right in, but she didn't. So let me ask you, Dr. A, was that her body or was that her mind? In that moment, if you watch that, I know where I went. It wasn't physical.
Right.
She's human. She says that. She says we're not just athletes, we're people at the end of the day. And sometimes you just have to step back.
Yeah. It's interesting, Dr. Pat. I'm curious about, I mean, I think that statement is even more profound than it implies. And that is, at the end of the day, we are just people. And what does that mean exactly? What comes to mind in that context is, we especially, I'm sure this resonates, or that you understand this, Dr. Pat. And I can say this as an extreme athlete in my 20s and 30s as well. Is you get to a point, and I think other people expect this as well. You treat yourself as if you are a machine. You just output, 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 output. Okay, just do a little bit more, just do a little bit more, output, output. And there is a complete disregard for our entire being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's probably what she meant by, at the end of the day, we are just people.
Yeah, she goes, listen, here's the punchline. This really is to why you're doing this episode, because in a series of posts, she goes back and she makes it very clear. She says, mind and body are simply not in sync. Mind and body are simply not in sync. That's what they're not in sync. So let's talk about this. What other information do we need to understand the importance, not just of your Simone Biles, but every one of us? Mind and body are not in sync. Think about it. Your mind is not aligned, it's not in sync, and you're piling 6 kids in your minivan, and you are driving these 6 kids to soccer. Where's your mind? Right? Your body's driving the car. But what are you doing? You see, you go into the office for a perfect presentation that you know you're going to make to land that big deal. But your mind and your body are not in sync. How does it show up in present? For all you out there in careers and self-employed, let's just talk about this. How this shows up for you is when you're making presentations, they can smell you coming if your mind and body is not in sync. The minute that you waver, the minute you step or don't step, the minute that you're not able to have mind and body be one in this world is the time in your life when something is at risk. Sometimes it's not a big deal, but like Simone Biles said, this is a hard surface we work on. This is a hard surface we work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The opposite is this. I know we're talking about the Olympics because it is happening and we're seeing the best of the best. We're seeing people that trained beyond anything you and I can imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see it when their mind and body are in sync. Who am I thinking about? I'm thinking about the United States woman who won the discus throw. How in the world did she throw that thing? I mean, come on. We're watching it. We're watching my friend's kid run in the do the BMX races. And I'm watching, seriously? You're really going in that speed around that turn? It's no different in our lives. And I think let's have you talk to this, because while we're talking about the Olympics, every one of us is a champion in our own right. But what do we need to learn to have mind and body in sync? That's the question.
That's a great question. And, I think it's interesting that we are talking about the Olympics, because I think, the Olympics, it's showing us an amplified experience. I mean, it's just amplified in terms of just our daily experience. And, in Simone Biles' statement, the thing that really caught my attention was, and I don't trust myself anymore.
Yeah.
When our mind, and first of all, when our mind and body is in sync, amazing things can happen. We see it over and over again. We see it over in just the magical moments of people shining in our worlds, whether they're athletes like Simone Biles, or they're motivational speakers, or somebody who's in their art and they are just powerful presences. That is when we know that the mind and body are powerfully connected. And we know when we have that mind body connection is because there's a flow. There's a flow. We're in the zone. We're in the flow states, and things just come. And there is that tremendous sense in ourselves. And when we talk about this tremendous trust in ourselves, it's like think about a metaphor, being in a company. When you work well together and you have a really strong team, you can create amazing things, right? This isn't any different. We have our own team. We have our mind, we have our body, we have our essence, and that's our team. And when they're working well together, we trust ourselves. We trust our inner wisdom. We trust that our bodies are going to do the thing that we need them to do in our lives. And when that flows, oh my goodness, amazing things happen. We see that in history over and over and over and over again, with all of the wonderful things that we've seen, whether they're inventions, whether they're performances, whatever, we are profoundly impacted.
Yeah. I got to study with Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who is the founder of flow theory. I had a brief encounter when I was at Claremont. He was teaching. But let's talk about this in the words of flow. You see, if you look at this concept of flow, you all know, you've heard flow. You've heard people say in the zone. When people refer to these two things, what do you think they're talking about? In the case of flow, it's this state of a higher form of concentration, a sense of control, a sense of mastery. It's an enjoyment. It's an interest. It's a distortion, here it is, of sense and time. How do you do that when all of this is working like the beauty that we were given? Without distraction. Didn't you bring up cave people? I want to talk about this. The evolution, if you believe in us walking around with clubs and whatnot, right? These people had such a connection to mind and body, believe it or not, whatever you want to say that they didn't have going on up there. That is why we're on the planet, because they had this. They had this connection, and that connection gave them such intuitive insight. What is it about indigenous people that know, don't eat that berry, eat this berry, put this and this and mix it together? They learn this thing. But this is not for only Simone Biles. This is our next frontier. Dr. A, if we don't get this, we will not understand that AI is not a human condition. AI is not our purpose. And we will stop understanding the power that we have within to orchestrate the ease and grace of an amazing life. We will not be able to be empowered. And that's why we're talking about it. It's not mind over body and body over mind. And of course, there's spirituality. But this is not just for the few, but we have to learn this.
You're absolutely right. And I'm, of course I get excited. I try to temper my excitement too much. I'll be arms flailing and those kinds of things. So I'm trying to temper my excitement. I get very passionate about this, Dr. Pat. This is not meant for just the select few or the elite.
No.
Every single one of us has this. And, it is so important to me to get this message across, Dr. Pat. And again, those who have listened know my story. And, I am a statistical anomaly. And why is that? Because I trusted my inner being. And this is what is so important. We come into this world equipped. We have everything we need to do whatever it is we want to do. And in order to tap into that power, it is critical that we have the partnership of our minds, the partnership of our bodies, and also the partnership of our essence, our spirit, whatever we want to call it, intuition, higher self. We can call it whatever we want to call it. It doesn't change the reality of this power that we have, that when we are working well, when these three parts of our being are in sync and are in a powerful partnership, amazing things can happen for everybody, not just the select few.
Yeah. Yeah. We are not the people that, like, if you look at what is that thing you fill out when you graduate, like junior high school, there's like this little book everybody writes stuff in.
The yearbook? Your yearbook?
The yearbook thing. And they all write it in. You're never going to see in there, oh, yeah, we think she's going to. No, we are not on the grid in terms of, we are on the outside of the bell-shaped curve for you and I to ever be achieving anything in life like we are today, and yet to do. Why? Because there is this on paper view, and then there's an esoteric view of mind, body, spirit, emotions that work so well together that they give us the courage, the boldness, and the gumption to keep taking the next step. And therefore, that's why you do what you do to help people, because you know what can be done. You've done it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure we both have, Dr. Pat, knowing your story, right?
I did something unusual last night.
What's that?
I went and played table tennis right up here at the Korean church. And I broke through a pattern that's not about flow. It's not, it's the opposite of mind-body connection. I broke through the pattern of saying, I'm always going to be too tired on a Monday night to go do something I love. And I'm telling you, I had this in my mind yesterday. And when time came, I came home from the office after a very long day. And instead of I'm too tired, I just came home and I said, let's go to Korean church and play. And the hardest thing to do is to start. I hope we can do a show on what does it mean to get out of the self-empowerment gate? What does it mean to get out of the self-empowerment starting blocks? Yeah. Because once you get out of the blocks, then you can allow all these other things to take form. But if you cannot get out of the blocks, you're basically frozen in time. Does that sound a little bit too downy to end the show?
Well, let me know. I think it's the reality, right? It's the reality. I do what I do for a living because a lot of us are blocked. And what does that mean exactly? Basically, what that means is we've lost communication to the power within us. That's what it means. That's all it means. It's that simple. And how do you regain that? First and foremost, what's interesting, Dr. Pat, is, we're talking about these things and, some people might think it's fluff or it's like, what is this about? And this is very practical. This is very practical. We've lost touch with our inner being, whether it's our bodies, whether it's our spirit, and we get so caught up in the games that our minds play with us. And, what can we do? I mean, it's very simple. Just slow down. Slow down and go inside. You don't have to have any skills. You don't have to know what to do. Just trust the process. You go inside, you're quiet, and you will notice that your body has a lot to say, and it will help you. It is your partner in this self-empowerment train. It is your partner. And it's really critical that we reconnect with that part of ourselves. Yeah.
It is the empowerment zone. You know, Mahali would talk about flow and zone together. My regret is I never had him on the show, but there is a conversation that says flow is in positive psychology. Now we actually finally have something called positive psychology. Hello. And it's known as being in the zone or locked in. See, I love this. Locked in, the mental state in which a person performing some or any activity is fully immersed and feeling of energized focus, full involvement, enjoyment in the process.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So simple, so hard.
Right. Now, remember, as I know we need to wrap up today's episode, remember your body is a powerful partner on your journey to empowerment. By listening and taking care of your body, you can strengthen your relationship to it and its partnership in your empowerment. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from the discussion. And before we end today, if anybody is interested in working with me personally, you are welcome to find me on my website at www.empoweredlivingcoaching.com. So that's a wrap. Have a great day. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to the Empowered Living Zone show with me, Dr. A, to create the life you crave. Tune in on the first and third Tuesdays at noon Pacific time on transformationtalkradio.com and get ready for another show. Say yes to creating positive and empowering change in your life and move beyond life's challenging terrain into the zone of success. Be ignited by spirit, fueled by purpose, and guided by vision in the Empowered Living Zone. For more information on how to do deep transformational work with me and to create the life you crave, visit empoweredlivingcoaching.com. That's empoweredlivingcoaching.com. See you next time.